Good evening and welcome to Mindful Life 295. I am your host, Nathan Springer. Thank you for being here. It is the 20th of the 10th of 2023. Yeah. The month is moving along. The year is moving along. Christmas season is around the corner. Christmas is the most wonderful time of the year, of course. But we're talking about issues here in Trinidad and Tobago, the issues that regularly pop up, and the issue that made a lot of headlines this past week, coming off from the last weekend, were fees that were double charged from customers at PriceMart. And it turns out that the error didn't originate at PriceMart. The error originated at a bank, and the bank is right now taking full blame for it. They're taking full blame for it, saying do not put the blame on PriceMart. It wasn't PriceMart's fault. And I consider this to be a relatively positive outcome for some reasons. Let's jump into that and browse over this quickly. Republic MD, don't blame PriceMart for our error. Managing Director of Republic Bank Nigel Batiste has expressed concern about the negative backlash that PriceMart has received as a result of the bank's processing issue, which affected credit card customers. While it is understandable that impacted customers are concerned about this development, the level of negative sentiment directed towards PriceSmart is regrettable, since the matter was not of their making. We once again want to reassure the public that the matter was corrected and all steps have been taken to prevent reoccurrence, Batiste said in a release issued today. Well, when was that? Today? Whatever day that was. Now, the fact that the issue didn't originate at PriceMart is comforting, at least to me. I didn't lose any money, so I don't know if it's comforting to the people who lost money. But what that seems to suggest is that at least PriceMart doesn't have the ability to, at their own will, make a next withdrawal off of your card. The error came from the bank. The bank has the ability to tamper and touch with your account. No problem, H. Dillon. The bank has that ability. So if the error came from the bank, it's understandable. The bank has the permission, as it were, to make such errors because they have the permission to touch money inside there. If the error came from PriceSmart, that would have been totally scary, that PriceSmart somehow was able to initiate a withdrawal from anyone's account, from anyone's card. But the error coming from the bank does, to me, slightly soothe this issue. Now, as with so many of those things, we never hear exactly what the error was, and we very likely never will. And to me, that takes away a bit from the comfort of the situation. If you're trying to tell people that this error is not going to happen again, it was a bad thing that happened, etc., etc., well, to me, the best way to do that is explain to me what exactly happened and how are we sure it's not going to happen again. Like the idea that something like this could happen, you pave it over and go on without an explanation, to me, it's a bit ridiculous. I would like an explanation on this. I know very likely I may never get it, and that's just the way these stories go, but I would like one. Didn't they say that all transactions were done as US instead of TT? Well, that's just the reality of the PriceSmart transactions on a whole. That just reveals something that many people didn't know, that when you purchase things over the counter, well, not over the counter, at the point of sales at PriceSmart, it seems immediately transferring that to US dollars, so you're purchasing from PriceSmart in US dollars basically. At least that's what it seems to be. That's what seems to be the case with this error. That's what this error seems to have shown. But that wasn't the error in and of itself. That was the error why the repayment of the funds were less. That's why you got less money when they paid you back, and they're attempting to balance that back now. That's what that has to do. But the reason for the error isn't the US dollar to TT dollar business. That's not the reason for the error. They never said that. To me, that in and of itself is very interesting. Like, I wonder, how do you make such an arrangement with the bank? Can I, as a regular business person, make such an arrangement? Good night, Michelle. Can I, as a regular business person, make such an arrangement with the bank that anyone who pays me, the money is taken as US dollars? I don't know if that is for certain the deal that PriceSmart has, but that certainly seems to be what is going on there. Because when the money was taken out, they say the money was taken out in US dollars, so when it was paid back in the converted TT dollar amount, it would have been a lesser value. But it was taken out from a TT dollar account. So are they saying that they have an arrangement that automatically converts money from that TT dollar account to US dollars once you're purchasing at PriceSmart? If you have a credit card, you can be charged in US dollars even though you pay in TT. Yes, I am aware you can buy things from your credit card in US dollars. But is that what goes on at PriceSmart? And can I do that? Can regular business people do that? Can you set up a Visa link system where all money paid to you via card comes in as US dollars? How does one do that? How does one get access to such a privilege? Just ask the bank. Somehow I feel the answer is going to be a swift no. Is this why Forex is so low? What about Massey? Well, you're asking questions there. And there are Forex issues in Trinidad. There have been Forex issues in Trinidad for a long time now. And if it is that every single purchase in PriceSmart, whether it be TT dollars or whatever, is automatically transferred into US dollars in their account, well, you could understand how they have swift access to a lot of US dollars. And wouldn't that give them kind of advantage over regular local business people who have to go and appeal to the bank asking for those US dollars? That to me is the question brought up by this banking issue. Beside just the questions about how the error happened in the first place, the other question to me is on that US dollar auto buy business that PriceSmart has working there. How does one get that? I would like it, please. I would like to set up a links that only gets US dollars. Please, thanks. Can someone tell me how? All right. Current prices seem to be on the rise. It seems to be inevitable. The RIC announced it, and they announced what their recommendations might be. Unfortunately, not favorable. Not favorable. Let's jump in on that article there. RIC to meet with T and Tech. Homeowners could face up to 64% rate increase. After months of public consultations and other engagement with stakeholders, the Regulated Industries Commission recommendations for increasing electricity rates across the board have largely remained unchanged. And to me, what you think, Ari, with respect to RIC, to me, this is a fault right there. What's the point of public consultations if the public consultation has no effect on your final statement? Do you have evidence that Massey's local deposits automatically turn to US dollars? No, I do not. And I have never said that. I didn't say that. I was talking about PriceSmart. Because the evidence of that is in the error that just went on last weekend. The errors that went on last weekend showed that TT dollar purchases were transferred to US dollars. So that's that evidence. But as for the RIC, to me it seems a bit of a mockery to go around the country, get people to come and give you recommendations from a side and then basically take none of them. That's kind of a mockery. And as such, homeowners now face the possibility of their electricity bills increasing by as much as 64% by next year, with similar rate increases for commercial and industrial customers also on the cards. Industrial customers will also face a rate increase between 119% and 126%. And bear in mind, when you see industrial customers and commercial customers getting rate increases also, that is going to affect us too. Those are businesses. Commercial and industrial companies, they don't do what they do for the kicks of it. They do it to make money. If you charge them a higher electricity price, there's a strong possibility prices on the customer end raises. Asked by the Express what she would tell those who participated in the various consultation processes, given that not much has changed, RIC Chairman Dawn Kalinda said yesterday, "We will actually tell them when they see the full determination, they will see several areas which we will highlight where we have changed our previous position." So there are some small areas when you see the full thing and you read through all 500 pages or how much ever, there may be a couple paragraphs where they edited some things with the consultations. Yep, and all because the largest debtor, the government, owes them so much money. That does have a large part to play with it. The government owes them, so they need to get some more. And they're recommending increases all around. They're recommending those increases. Now, there's a chart here that basically has the prices, has some general prices, it seems. I hope this chart is accurate to what they're intending. I'm reading this from The Guardian. So The Guardian has total bill bi-monthly, current as it currently is. If let's say you pay $487, I'd say that might be a bit close to lower on the average side for middle income. $857 maybe average. I don't know how many people do it there. $857 around average for a household bill, you'd say. Low end. So the total bill, if your total bill was around $857 previously, that's 31% increase, $264 more bi-monthly. But they're proposing that they collect this bill monthly instead of bi-monthly as Tiantec previously did it. So let's say your bi-monthly bill was $857 previously. Now your monthly bill is going to be $560. So monthly you would pay less than you would have bi-monthly, but now that bill comes every month. I could tell y'all, $264 more bi-monthly is nothing. So the increase will be more as it's monthly. No, the increase wouldn't be more. It's just you would pay it in smaller amounts. So you would have, if you had to pay the bill bi-monthly, you would have had to pay $1,100. But because you're paying it monthly, you'd have to just pay $500 and change. Now, that's on the $800 bills. I know many people out there have $1,000 bills. Many people, and I'm not talking about super rich people, I'm talking average people. Multiple air conditions, a dryer, etc., etc. $1,000 electricity bills bi-monthly is a regular, pretty common thing. If you had a bill clocking up in high 1,000s, you may very likely be paying close to $3,000 in the new rate, which would be $1,500 a month. You see, what they did is they increased it more for those who use more. If you use less electricity, your increase was around 11%, as low as 15%, sorry. If you use more electricity, your increase is as much as 64%. This is that kind of... You're welcome, Manix. This is that kind of socialist thinking, where from those who have more, you take more. But if you're talking about fairness, that doesn't feel fair at all. I mean, if you were a middle income family, you were using, let's say you're really using electricity out here, using $2,000 electricity bill. Just because you were able to sufficiently pay your $2,000 bill, now they're going to increase you 64% more on your bill. But T-Tech is overproducing current. Why charge more instead of encouraging people to use more? Well, T-Tech doesn't produce electricity. T-Tech is really in charge of the infrastructure. T-Tech purchases the produced electricity from private producers. I think it proves the point subsidizing things is not sustainable. You see, here's my problem with some of this, all of this discussion, and this is where government gets in and creates problems here. T&T Chamber consider low-income customers proposed increase in electricity rates. The Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce has called on the government and state entities to carefully review the impact of the recommendations made on low-income people. And you see, here's where I see things. We have the government controlling both sides of the economy. The government controls the pay of the public sector, while the government also controls many of the bills that the public sector has to pay. How is it reasonable? Because the government is in control of this. How is it reasonable as a government to pay people 4% more and increase their electricity 64% more? And implement house and building taxes, and be aware of the increasing inflation and increased gas prices, while only giving them a 4%. That is not... They're not even taking back the raise, they're taking back more than the raise. If you got let's say you were making $10,000, 4% on $10,000 is what? $400? $400 more is 4% on 10,000. $400 more. In the increase in electricity bill and the increase in gas, $400 is already gone. It's already gone. Your extra 400 is already gone. And now, I argue against government employing people. I argue against minimum wage, etc., etc., etc. I argue against all those things. But to me, it seems kind of ridiculous when we are already in such a position. It's nearly like you have slaves. and you're working the slaves and you're feeding the slaves, and you increase the amount of work you demand of the slaves and decrease the amount of food you're giving them, you are employing a lot of the Trinidad and Tobago workforce. They are under your employ. All of their money comes from you. And strangely enough, a lot of their money is demanded to go back to you. How does it make sense to increase the amount you take by less than you increase the amount you give them? And I am not a fan of government subsidies. I am not a fan generally of government subsidies. But in a case like Trinidad and Tobago, government subsidies make sense. And to me, I would rather government subsidies than nearly all of the other ways we spend money here in Trinidad and Tobago. You see, what government subsidies do in a country like Trinidad and Tobago, they use our natural resources and give us back in a way that is tangible, in a way we can feel. So, as a country, we have oil and gas in abundance. Now, the regular man cannot really get the benefit of that oil and gas in his pocket. You don't get that benefit of the oil and gas in your pocket directly. You may not, for the regular person, many people may not be employed in the oil and gas industry, so it's not like you're going to get that nice, super high Petrotrin pay either. You're not directly benefiting from our resources. But being a Trini, it would be wise of us to attempt to make sure that Trinidadians benefit from Trinidadian resources. So what we do is the multinational companies, the foreign corporations that make a lot of money, even the local businesses too, that make a lot of money off of our natural resources, we take the taxes and we use that money to benefit the people of the country. And seeing as we have so many resources, we get so much money that we are able to lift the ease on people in life in this country. Now, if you're going to ask me, where is it better to spend that money that we get from our resources? Any day, I would prefer, give me the gas subsidy, give me $1 diesel. Because what $1 diesel does for me is the savings, that extra money, the subsidized money goes directly to my pocket. Give me cheap electricity, because what that does is the saved money goes directly to my pocket. That's what subsidies do. Now, the government might say, well, we have interest in spending the money other places. There are other things that the government must do. We can't just be throwing away money frivolously like that. Well, I don't consider saving me money personally to be frivolous. If I could get $1,000 extra based on subsidies for the month, $1,000 in my hands extra, I could do a lot. Versus if that $1,000 goes to the government, what would the government do with that extra $1,000 a month? And let's look at some of how our government spends money. You know, our government spends money all around the place. Let's look at how they spend money, why they need to cut those subsidies and cut back how they spend money. Scandalous waste of $55 million. Government terminates lease for office earmarked for DPP but never used. After spending $55 million on a building in Port of Spain that was never occupied, the government terminated the lease at the end of September 2023 because the Director of Public Prosecutions refused to move in. At the end of September 2023, the government terminated that lease after having spent a total in rent, electricity bills, repairs and renovations to introduce bulletproofing along the entire northeastern wall of the property at the request of the DPP of $55,551,443.93. The lease on that building has been terminated because the DPP has refused to move into the building, Attorney General Reginald Amos said yesterday. Imagine that. Who paying for this? What you mean who paying for this? We paying for this. The reason you cannot get cheaper electricity is because the government needs the 55 million to rent and outfit a building that they are never going to use. True Ninja, you asking the question there. Who is accountable for that? Asked by Hossain whether there were any plans for a new building, the Attorney General said consideration was being given to temporary accommodation for some of the DPP staff who are going to be allocated by the JLSC. So what that means is very likely this year they're going to rent somewhere else again with more of our money again. Munilal, who is to blame? Oropouche East MP Dr. Rudal Munilal asked who was to blame for this scandalous waste. Just what you're asking there, True Ninja. Who is to be held accountable for this? Whether it was the DPP or the Attorney General. Amos said he was not prepared to answer the question on the premise of scandalous, but said that the government assumed responsibility for the expenditure on the building at the invitation of the DPP in 2014. So, according to the Attorney General, the DPP requested this building in 2014 and the government started that. Now, you're trying to tell me from 2014 to 2023, at no point in time, anyone in between the DPP's office and the Attorney General's office could have discussed and said this building is not what we want, forget about it. At no point in time, not even a month later, who is the owner of this property? I didn't dig that far into it, Lion Star. I'm pretty sure you may be able to dig into it and find out. I didn't personally dig that far into it. I wouldn't doubt it's a government friend or family. You know, something that oftentimes is funny to people and shocking to some people, it might shock you to find out that it may in fact be an opposition member of parliament. It might shock you to find out the Mark bus and you hear it's an opposition MP's wife who owns the building. They're all in it together. It's a small club. You and I aren't in it, and they're in it together. Don't get mixed up. Munilal went on, are you indicating to us that it is not scandalous that the taxpayer has paid $55 million for a building that was never occupied for even an hour? The Attorney General said he was not about to spend the afternoon on semantics, adding that the money was expended at the request of the DPP. It was expended for the reason that the government considered it important to have a functional office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, and to the extent that he declined to move in, it was terminated and brought to an end. And here you hear the scant regard, the flippancy with which these people deal with our money. He is not about to spend the afternoon on semantics. $55 million is semantics, you know. How many months of my electricity bill subsidy would $55 million have? Listen, I don't think, probably all of us in this live together, the subsidy for all of our electricity bills, probably for the extent of our lifetimes, may not cross $55 million. All the subsidies for all of us in this life, all of our electricity subsidies could be paid till we dead with that $55 million. The gas at the pump subsidy, we could probably get subsidized gas for the rest of our lifetime. All of us in the life together with that $55 million. That, you know, the Attorney General considers semantics. Semantics, you know. Just semantics. Munilal repeated the question, who did the AG think was responsible for the waste of $55 million of taxpayers' money? Deputy Chairman of the committee, Esmond Ford, determined that this question had already been asked and answered, so they didn't have to ask it again. I don't understand, as an oil producing nation, gas so expensive here. Well, gas is the same price all over the world basically. Gas has a global price. What makes gas cheap in Trinidad and Tobago is our government used to at least pay some of the cost for us. And many people point out that we have nearly the cheapest electricity in the Western Hemisphere. We have cheap gas, cheaper than most places. But then go look at places like Oman, go look at Qatar, go look at the United Arab Emirates. Look at places that have likewise resources. And that's what you do when you have those resources. When you have those resources, you share it around to the citizens. Persons with disabilities, yep, and they are going to struggle. Let's look at how else the government spends our money. $100 million to upgrade houses in squatting sites. Some $100 million has been allocated to improve houses for individuals within 251 squatting sites across TT. Minister in the Ministry of Housing, Adrian Leon, said on Thursday. Orpuch East MP Dr. Rudal Munilal said last year the program's allocation was $55 million, but just $22 million was actually spent. Yet the 2024 allocation leapt to $100 million. When I listen to Parliament and hear how these people talk about tens of millions of dollars and hundreds of millions of dollars, it kind of breaks my heart, you know. And it's not that I don't think people need help in society. It's not that I don't think so. But in a country where, according to the government, we're struggling with getting enough revenue, so much so that we can't keep giving people cheap electricity. In a country like that, is the best use of our so limited resources building squatting homes? And after you build the homes for these squatters who weren't able to build the homes on their own, would they now have to pay the increased electricity bill? Would they be able to do that? Would it have been more practical then to allow the squatters cheaper electricity and forget about trying to build houses for them? It's annoying to me that the government says they don't have enough money, and the solution to that is always attempting to get more money out of the people instead of possibly spending less. You know, you can spend less. It is possible. And salaries, just so you know, Michelle, part of spending less may in fact include cutting some salaries. cutting some workers. And you see, this is the problem. The government isn't free. The government uses resources from the country. The more you want the government to give us, the more they take from us. I rather the government give me less in terms of things like building houses for squatters and just share the commonwealth. Give us the subsidies and done that. To me, I might prefer the subsidies than many of these other grand spending ideas the government has. Hard segue though, from finance and governance to school and education. I saw that the young lady was expelled, and that made a bit of news. Some people had some strong views on it, on whether she should have been expelled or not. Superior pupil expelled. Caught on tape shouting threats at teacher. The Superior East Secondary School pupil caught on tape shouting threats at a teacher in the classroom has been expelled. The disciplinary action was imposed by the Ministry of Education on Monday. Following the incident last week, a decision was taken by school officials to suspend the pupil for disruptive and unruly behavior, use of obscene language towards a teacher, issuance of verbal threats, and use of aggressive, intimidating behavior towards a teacher, and gross disrespect towards authority. Further action was taken, however, on Monday when the Ministry of Education wrote to the teenager's mother informing her that her daughter had been expelled. The letter was signed by Education Minister Dr. Nian Gadsby Dully. It started: considering the above and in accordance with Section 44(2)(d) of the Education Act, the Minister of Education orders the expulsion of the student due to the gravity and severity of their actions. The decision, the letter stated, was final. You obviously don't understand the concept of macroeconomics. Any government must spend money. Nikolai Salandi, if you would like to have a discussion, you don't start off by talking about your assumptions and what someone understands. It's arrogant and you are wrong. And any government must spend money isn't the same thing as the government must spend the maximum amount of money. And there are theories and political concepts that deal with different levels of government spending and levels of government involvement. Do you know there's something called anarcho-capitalism? If you think every government must spend money, and I do not understand the concept of macroeconomics because I think governments spend way too much, go read up on what anarcho-capitalism is, and then we'd see who understands. Anyway, Scafty says expelled from the school is never a solution. Government must spend money on what? Expelled from the school is never a solution. I disagree, Scafty. Because schools have multiple students. The nature of what public schooling is it's a public resource, as it were. Think of it as the beach. It's the beach. If someone goes to the beach and disrupts the enjoyment for everyone else, shouldn't they be expelled from the beach? I could tell you, if I saw that student carrying on that way, and I was informed that that is their regular modus operandi in school, I wouldn't want my child in school with them. My child is going to be disadvantaged if they are in school with such a disruptive student. And to think that we would want them to just remain in the government schools, remain there disrupting the schools, making schooling harder for the government school students, and then at the end we're surprised when the prestige schools and the denominational schools keep outperforming the government schools. And as I was saying back in the days when we were discussing about the haircutting issue and those schools that insisted boys cut their hair, you see the results of the increased discipline. It is different, then we will be failing. That child should be taken out of that school environment. Well, I didn't read out everything there, but it should be understood that expulsion doesn't mean the student is put in exile. To me, expulsion is the perfect place to deal with the student on a further level. Whether it is put them in some kind of military academy, whether it is social worker to find out the situation, etc., etc. Whatever it is, expulsion is a nice starting position. To me, and I always say, I have been a fierce proponent of this. I have been a fierce proponent of this a long time now. I think a lot of these schools are too lax. They're too lax. Expel the students that give trouble, let them be dealt with some other place, and allow the students that want to succeed to be able to do it. I teach lessons. I am a teacher. I've taught in schools too, but I only teach privately now. And there are an enormous number of students that are all kinds of different, anxious and afraid of going to school because of disruptive students in their schools. Students that the teachers know. Students that the teachers know. You talk to a student and they say, nah, I don't want to go to school. Why? There's a bully in my school. You told the teacher, yeah, the teachers know. What the teachers doing about that? Nothing. Primarily biology, but just about everything I teach also. Most of the sciences, math and English, geography, environmental. I think the expulsion isn't even about, or at least it shouldn't even be, about punitive punishment on the child. Expulsion is about getting the school system to be functional. That's what expulsion is about. Getting a functional school system. Allow students who want to learn to be able to learn without the disruption. Because they can't teach us hands are tied after a certain person took out corporal punishment. And I understand that maybe in a time gone before, corporal punishment may have had a lot of benefit. But I could tell you, I don't think just reintroducing corporal punishment now is going to have the kind of positive effect that some people think. Those indisciplined children, can you imagine trying to beat that young lady? The young lady who was cussing up the teacher. Can you imagine trying to pull out a belt to hit that girl? That is not going to work out for you. Even corporal punishment depended upon a certain level of discipline, you know. You are depending on a child to come and stand up in front of you and put out their hand and take one lash. Ow! Put out your hand again. Put out your hand again. Ow! That's a disciplined child to a certain level. The kind of discipline levels we have now, you holding any one of them to beat them? This generation needs some tough love. Yeah, put the army reserves in schools. And you see, I am not even against the army in some schools. But then, let's not punish all of these students, you know, as the burning topic with Palestine is. Collective punishment. Let's not collectively punish all of these students. Not all of these students are disruptive. Let's put the disruptive students into a military academy where the military reserves can be there for them. And the students who want to learn, the students who it may be they have struggle understanding some concepts, but their problem isn't in discipline and disruption, allow them to learn in a nice schooling environment. too many abusive modern day teachers as well. Yeah. I could tell you, if my nice little pickney inside of a school, I prefer you don't hit them. You just call me. I will discipline my child. I will discipline my child effectively, but you don't hit my child, please. That's why I say I don't think we are in those times anymore. I think those times have passed us. Not that I am against corporal punishment at home per se, but the idea of public schooling engaging in corporal I somehow think that's going to be a bit disastrous. I think that's going to be a bit disastrous. Now, for me, if you want to reintroduce corporal punishment, what we need to do is privatize the school system more. If you have private schools, so if there's a private school, I run Mindful Education. If you send your child to my institution and you trust me, you may tell me let's not go there. You may tell me that, hey, if he get trouble, bossy tail in it, as some parents might, because you have a relationship with that institution. But to just throw your child into the public education system, and any random public school teacher who just had to graduate with a bachelor degree in something and apply for their teacher's number could beat your child. No. That sounds like a recipe for problems. Plenty problems. My son's former principal told me to forgive a teacher because she going through menopause. You see that kind of thing. And that's another problem with the corporal punishment business. I am not very old, but I was on the tail end of corporal punishment. I had very few years of corporal punishment in school. I witnessed more than I got, and I saw it phased out. And one of the problems with corporal punishment was biasness. Biasness was seen at a whole different level. I know a primary school where there was a sexist teacher. That teacher favored the girls. The girls never got licks. The girls barely got into trouble. And the boys were beaten till their calves were sore and swollen. Listen, I rather not. Can you imagine your child in a class where the teacher doesn't like them and has the ability to hit them? Bruv. But expulsion to me makes sense. Expulsion is how you actually curate the environment of the school. You have to curate the environment of the school. You have to do that. The culture that children are coming from now, that some children are coming from, it's not the same culture that all children come from. And that's part of the issue. It's like, if your child grew up 2-parent household, 2 working parents, a nice air-conditioned house, barely outside and playing, all of that, a relatively pampered child, and you send them to school with a child who grew up living with his big brothers and the girlfriends on the drug block, and you put those 2 children in the same school, and the child who grew up on the drug block, he so happens to be disruptive. He's not one who took to discipline. How are you going to have those 2 children interact in the same school? How is that going to work? Both students would be disadvantaged by that. No one is benefited by that system. And people talking about the person who took the corporal punishment out of the school, I think that wasn't even as bad as the every child gets a place. I think all students don't perform best when placed in the same schools together. Fact. trying to force all students into the same schools together to make it seem like it's equal for all and everyone gets an equal chance here and we're all you're ruining it for everyone. The ones at the bottom aren't able to figure out where they would best fit in. All they think is they are loser and they cannot succeed at this, and they're frustrated and disruptive. The ones that may have been able to excel even further than the top that they already are at, they are not able to do that because they are held back in the system. That's not ideal. That doesn't help. So, in short, I agree with this expulsion. And I think they need to expel a lot more students. No student who stabbed another student is supposed to be able to return to the school. There's no way you are supposed to be able to use your stabbing of another student as a rank, remaining a student of my school. You can't remain a student in my school and have stabbed another student. Expelled. Go tell the regiment officers about it. How could a school engage in searches and they find knives in certain students' backpacks and those students are still students of the schools? And then you're telling me this Ministry of Education, this Minister of Education is telling the homeschooling parents that what they want is to force you to follow their mantras, how they do it. And if you don't follow how they want you to do it, they want to take your child from you, from your home, and drag them into that school where they barely expel students who do things like this. Yeah, right. But our Prime Minister is seeking help for these issues. Not just the schooling issue, crime in general. He went to Canada recently and he spoke there and he asked for some help. PM seeks Canada's help on crime summit in Ottawa. Help us. This was the request made of Canada by Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley as he admitted the crime situation in the Caribbean region had worsened. Something I read that he was saying, and it seemed interesting that he went to Canada with this kind of thinking. The Prime Minister said, noting the Caribbean parliaments and the Canada Parliament had benefited a lot from collaboration, Rowley said the current laws and regulations in place in the region did not cater for the populations that exist today. They catered for a different breed of people who had some moral compass, some underpinning of good behavior, some expectation of integrity in the institutions. And I actually agree with some of that. Some of our laws catered for a more moral people. I agree. And if we do not adjust our legal responses, the courts then become a mockery, laughed at by the criminals, because when you get before the courts and the court pretends to be this moral arbiter, the criminals become the victims and their concern becomes the primary concern, because you can't do them this and you can't do them that, and they just carry on what is in effect an ongoing criminal enterprise. Now, it's interesting to me that he carried that complaint to Trudeau and his government. Because Trudeau and his liberal government is kind of that very same view, where criminals are actually victims who need to be helped into not doing crime. And I personally believe that kind of theory doesn't work. And it's interesting that he went to Canada for that help. Like, How is Canada going to help with this? How does Canada show themselves to be able to handle extreme levels of violence in a multicultural society? Canada doesn't have that. If you want help, you go and speak to the president of El Salvador. That's the kind of help we need. Not Canadian softy help. And you know, the strange thing is, when Canada isn't doing the softy help, here's where the Canada help goes. Here's where the Canada help goes. Canada will legalize medically assisted dying for people addicted to drugs. Let me read that again for you all. I feel I need to drop the music a little bit. I need to drop the music a little bit for this. Canada will legalize medically assisted dying. That's where the doctors kill you, for people addicted to drugs. Some drug user activists have likened the move to eugenics and say Canada should be funding more harm reduction. Canada will legalize medically assisted dying for people who are addicted to drugs next spring, in a move some drug users and activists are calling eugenics. The country's medical assistance in dying law, which first came into effect in 2016, will be expanded next March to give access to people whose sole medical condition is mental illness, which can include substance use disorders. Okay, let me explain. If you have a medical condition, this medical assistance in dying was originally about if you have a medical condition that is terminal, you're going to die anyway, you are suffering, you can apply and they could allow doctors to kill you. Medical assistance in dying. Now they're expanding it. I believe they expanded it to children who may be considered ill. And now they're expanding it to mental illnesses. I don't know if you get how scary that is in and of itself. Because one of the symptoms of many mental illnesses is suicidal ideation. And you are going to recommend, or at least allow, to people the ability to kill themselves if they find themselves addicted to drugs. And you know, some people have argued that this that we see in Canada here is the natural end of public health care. I don't know if Michelle is still here, but some people say this is the natural end of nationalized public health care. Because in reality, Canada's healthcare is free. And when healthcare is free, what you get oftentimes is what is recommended to you by the doctors. So now you're in a situation where doctors recommend you die. There was a woman suffering from some kind of painful condition. Being that it's public health care, you don't pay and get your treatment as soon as possible. Just as in Trinidad and Tobago, you go on a waiting list, and she was waiting too long. She was in pain, And as a recommendation, they said, if you find the waiting is too long, how about MAID, medical assistance in dying? A soldier suffering post-traumatic stress, thinking he can't keep it together, goes for help in the public healthcare system in Canada. And this isn't a hypothetical. This is a situation that had happened. And they recommend for him, how's about you allow us to kill you? Now, here are some scary thoughts to add to things like this. They're saying it's going to include drug users. Can't drug users be placed in rehab against their will? I believe that can happen. If someone is seen on the street possibly being a danger to themselves or other people, they could be taken and placed into an institute without their permission. If death is seen as a suitable medical outcome for this condition, is it at all possible for the government, then the state, to pick up an addict, place them in an institution, and administer MAID to them, kill them, and it all be within the law? I am treading on dangerous grounds. I don't think I'm treading on dangerous grounds. I think Canada is treading on dangerous grounds. Is it just for terminally ill people? That's what it started as, Riyadh. It started off originally as for terminally ill people, but it has expanded. It has expanded now for people with mental illnesses and people who just don't want to live. Now, the idea with people with mental illnesses and people with drug addiction, that is insane to me, because mental illness and drug addiction could leave you with suicidal ideations as a symptom of something that is wrong. But this just seems like eugenics with a few less steps. Easy eugenics. Eugenics done easy. And I believe MAID right now is one of the leading causes of death in Canada. I can't remember the exact number. MAID accounted for 3.3% of all deaths in Canada in 2021, up from 2.4% in the previous year. So it's just increasing. It rose by 35%. I believe they were saying it's one of the top, it's in the top 5 leading causes of death right now in Canada. Like, you're going to really have as your leading cause of death in your country people killing themselves with the state medical apparatus approval. Well, you see, RL, where it's something you have to pay for, that's still a bit different, you know. Because someone who has a mental illness, someone who is a drug addict, they're not the kind of person generally who is someone who has suicidal ideations because they have some kind of mental issue going on. They are the people who are going to save up tens of thousands of dollars, fly to Switzerland to look out at a scenic view and of themselves. It's nearly like the free market and capitalism even solves that problem. Because, you know, as it stands, if you want to off yourself, like, I don't want to get too macabre and dark, but everyone could do it. Like, if someone really wants to do it, they can. The problem in this case is you're making it easier and doing it on a systemic level. I would not doubt that if Canada continues down this road, and they seem like they might, some century in the future, should we all be here, some moral people would be looking back over at some of this with the same kind of reprehension that we look back on certain things during World War II and during the colonization age. We'd look back on this with some of that kind of view. That a state apparatus created a system to streamline the killing of their depressed and downtrodden people in their country. Things too hard? How about you die? And that's who we are asking for help. Please help us, Canada. Where's the human rights organizations? Well, I suppose some human rights organizations may say a human has a right to kill themselves. And the reality is many human rights organizations are really just political organizations. You know? When you look at it, many human rights organizations are okay with transgressing human rights as long as it's on their team. It's not, many of those human rights organizations aren't all human rights. It's like Trinidad and Tobago, we have a human rights organization. We had a lawyer in charge at the top of our human rights organization, and human rights organizations the world over against the death penalty by and large. We had a very well-known, famous lawyer in Trinidad who was at the top of our human rights organization. No death penalty. Now, that lawyer got into governance with a party, and he was placed as the Attorney General. The lawyer who was previously the head of the human rights organization hung 10 men in a couple weeks. It was 10 or 9 men. Rapid fire. The human rights head. That lawyer. Human rights. You see, a lot of those human rights organizations, they're just political pressure groups, really and truly. They're political pressure groups that pressure according to their political narratives that they see fit. KR is globalist, which is why he was pro-WHO treaty and this Trudeau-Canadian government. Yup, he is. I regularly say that. And the modus operandi of our old Caribbean politicians is perfectly globalist. England allowed the Caribbean to get their independence in the hands of people that are in tune with the global hegemony. England, there were places England did not allow to get their independence when they saw who it was going to lead. There's some interesting history in Guyana on what the British did in terms of allowing Cheddi Jagan to rule versus allowing Burnham Ford to get into power, and why and which and who was the... So it's no surprise really then that the vast majority of our Caribbean leaders are all kind of globalists. They're very globalist. They're very government heavy. They're very much under the view that the government should run everything and that the government should always be in perfect synchronization with the global community too. Not my kind of thing at all. Not my kind of thing. They believe in all the global institutions, even if it's not in our interest. Correct. Anyway, that's all I have for now, people. Any further questions or comments inside of the live? What you all say? Bring maid to Trinidad, that might help reduce the crime? Anyway, if there are no further questions or comments inside of the live, that's all I have for now. I hope you educated, informed, or entertained people. This has been the Mindful Live. Make sure you hit that follow button if you are not following me. Make sure you head over to YouTube and subscribe to my YouTube channel over there, Nathan Springer on YouTube. You can, as usual, this has been brought to you by Mindful Education. You know, I don't plug that very often these days. Sometimes I forget. This has been brought to you by Mindful Education, the educational institution that I run. If you are interested in private tuition for students from preschool stages all the way up to CAPE, we offer one-on-one tutoring for those CAPE and CXC subjects. If you need that one-on-one attention, you need someone to really focus in on something. You might be a repeater, you might be someone struggling in a specific subject. You get in contact with us and we send a tutor out to you there. Private one-on-one tutoring. We also offer learning pods, which are small homeschool style classes for learning stages from preschool all the way up to CXC. We have those classes ongoing. If you have a student interested in joining, just contact us and they will jump into one of those. I am partial to the Singapore policy for the drug trade. You know, I don't know where my mind has been made up yet on the drug issue. Like there may have been a point in time where I may have been very much kind of for the legalization of drugs, because I see the war on drugs as being pretty much a failure, and the serious fervent fight against drugs is kind of what creates the black market for drugs in the first place. The fact that it's so illegal and people are hunting for it all the time is why the price increases and why there's such violence and a market for it in the first place. So I think you make those legal and you kind of take the legs out from the criminal underworld in that sense. However, looking at legalization in various parts of the world, it's like the corporal punishment issue, where I am not sure just bringing corporal punishment back into schools now is going to benefit people. I am not sure if we just take away laws against drugs right now, cold turkey, from the world, if that's going to, from Trinidad at least, is going to benefit the country. I feel like there may be quite a bit of negative trade-offs that we may have to face before we get some of the positives there. I don't think, though, being super stringent on drugs by and large works. In order to do that, you have to have a kind of unified society in the first place. It has to be a country like Japan or even Singapore. A country where there's more of a common culture. So, you could get the majority of the people in the country to already be out of favor with drugs. So when you have such a strict view on drugs, it's something that's just a very sheer minority of the country either way. So it's not something that creates a big issue. I'm not sure. I am honestly not sure where I'm at right now on the drugs issue. I still lean towards legalization, though. I still lean towards legalization. Not because I think drugs are good and people should be using them, but because I think the illegality of drugs is what makes the drug trade so lucrative. Anyway, that's that. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained, as I said. And I will see you guys again for the next Mindful Live show, which is going to be Monday. Sorry, this is the end of the week here, so I will see you guys again for the next show Monday. Not tomorrow, not the weekend. We aren't here on the weekend. So, see you guys Monday at 9 p.m. Until then, people, peace out. Laters. Stay well. Enjoy your weekend. I am out. Later.